But first, we really are reaching crunch time for Brexit. This week, the government put forward proposals to the European Union for a revised deal. Now, they weren't dismissed out of hand, but the response in Brussels was lukewarm at best. Boris Johnson has once again claimed that we will leave the EU on the 31st of October, deal or no deal. But how exactly does he plan to make that happen? Well, let's see if our first guest has the answers. The Housing and Local Government Secretary, Robert Jenrick. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hi, good morning.
This morning. Now, I am keen to get on to Brexit and to try and answer some of those questions I know many of our viewers will have. But I just want to start on a story that Sky News has really been focusing on in the last few days, and that's about the death of a 19-year-old boy, Harry Dunn, killed in a road accident in August. And the suspect is the wife of a diplomat who has left to the United States claiming diplomatic immunity. What is the government doing about this?
Well, I'm very sorry, and this is a very tragic incident. The Foreign Secretary has spoken to the American ambassador and made clear our disappointment that the woman involved in this incident has left the UK using diplomatic immunity. Cases of diplomatic immunity do come up from time to time. They are difficult, but the family involved have our absolute assurance that we're going to do everything we can to resolve this. We want the police to be able to continue their inquiries and for whatever actions they deem fit to be able to take place and for justice to be done. You
say that cases of diplomatic immunity come up, but I mean, this is a death. It's not, a few avoided speeding tickets. It's pretty serious.
This is a very...
It couldn't be more serious.
No, quite. This is a very serious situation. My heart goes out to this family who now want answers and want justice. What I can say is that the local MP, who is Andrea Leadsom, the Business Secretary, has met the family. The Foreign Secretary has offered to meet the family and will do so shortly. And he couldn't have been clearer when he spoke to the American ambassador that we are very disappointed by the way events have turned out, and we want to see the US change their mind and this lady come back to the UK to answer the questions that she needs to. OK, thank you. Well, we'll certainly be pursuing that story in the kind of coming days and weeks. I'm keen to talk to you about Brexit as well. Are we going to leave on the 31st of October? Absolutely. I mean, the Prime Minister couldn't have been clearer, as you said in your introduction, all along, that this government wants to get Brexit done. We want to leave on the 31st of October, and we will be doing everything in our power to bring that about. So if there isn't a deal agreed by the 19th of October, which, let's get real, is definitely a possibility, will the Prime Minister be writing a letter requesting an extension to Brexit? Well, we've said that, as any government would do, we will comply with the law. However, all of our... It's a really specific question. Well, all of our efforts now are focused on trying to get a deal. And we've just put forward some, I think, very reasonable and thoughtful proposals to the EU. They try to answer the questions that had dogged the previous deal prepared by Theresa May. They say that for the legitimate concerns of the Irish government, that we will create a new arrangement on the island of Ireland, which will enable goods to flow freely. There won't be any hard infrastructure at the border, and we will remove the backstop and replace it with something much more democratic, which is a consent mechanism so that the people of Northern Ireland can always have an ultimate say of where they want these arrangements to continue. I hope that the EU will now engage with these proposals and that we can leave the EU in a very orderly and amicable way on the 31st of October. But I don't think, with greatest respect, there's much point in speculating on what might happen should the EU fail to come forward and engage with our proposals. OK, I know that you want this deal to get over the line, but just you have to bear with me for a minute, because if you just look at what the EU have been saying, we have to at least entertain the possibility that this is not going to happen. I mean, they've called for fundamental changes. Leo Varadkar says they fall short in a number of aspects. Donald Tusk says the EU is not convinced. I mean, you can see why people are getting a bit twitchy here, so I'll just go back to my question. If a deal isn't agreed, will the Prime Minister pen that letter requesting an extension? Well, the Prime Minister has been very clear that he is not going to extend Article 50. So I don't think he personally could have been any clearer. We have said that we will comply with the law. However, what we're going to do now is work as hard as we possibly can to secure that deal. And I know there are mixed messages coming out of the EU. There always are. This is a negotiation. You would expect there to be some noises off around the margins. However, the reaction to this deal has actually been surprisingly positive. If you look at the domestic reaction, You've seen support from the DUP,
yeah, but it's the EU
from Conservative members of Parliament.
That you need to sign it off before it comes back to that domestic
The EU,
audience.
one would hope, would like to come to the table and ensure that we can leave in an orderly fashion. Their criticisms in the past have been that we don't have a deal that's able to get it through the House of Commons. I think the PM has been able to demonstrate that this deal has a good chance of doing that. It's not just Conservatives and DUP members. Actually, there's a number of Labour MPs who do respect the outcome of the referendum who've said that they're inclined to support this arrangement. We hope that the EU will now productively engage in a discussion and that these can be the basis of a way forward.
You see, I'm still trying to work out what is going to happen because we're now in October. I mean, it's crunch time, right? And I have to say, I am really a little bit confused because you're saying that no matter what happens, you're not going to extend, you're going to leave deal or no deal at the end of October. You're also saying, as you have consistently, that the government is going to comply with the law. But the law, according to the Benn Act, says that if there isn't a deal, then there must be an extension. I mean, I don't understand this. You're a clever man. Come on, what's going on here? These things don't make sense.
Well, let's work through what could happen in the coming days. We've published these proposals. I think, as I said, that they're good proposals, and they do finally point us to a way forwards. The EU now need to engage with those. I think it would be extremely disappointing if the EU chose to walk away and not engage with proposals where we've made compromise and we know that there is a high degree of support here.
It's fair enough for people to work out what's going to happen in a couple of weeks' time if the EU doesn't agree. That's fair enough.
Well, if you want a good outcome, I don't think there's much to be gained in speculating on what we may or may not do, what tactics we might choose to deploy later on in the negotiation. But we have been clear that if we can't get a deal through the House of Commons, or if, which seems concerning at the moment, that the EU might not choose to engage with, I hope that's not the case, then this government has no intention of extending Article 50. We think the UK needs to move forwards. You've just seen at the Conservative Party conference the policies we've been putting forward for the future, like investing in the NHS, in schools, in extra police officers, in my own area, in housing. The whole country really is crying out for us to get Brexit done and to move forwards. And that's what we're trying to do now. So there is a moment here where the EU need to match our compromise with a willingness to negotiate. And they would be quite wrong if they think that by rejecting these proposals, we would change tack, offer something materially different to what we're putting forward here. We've put forward something that does represent a very significant compromise. We want them to engage in turn.
Can you rule out asking any other EU country to veto an extension?
I've not heard any serious talk of that beyond the speculation that I've seen in the papers. So I think that's, with all due respect, just tittle-tattle.
OK. So I just wonder, just listening to you, is the real truth that the government is prepared to extend, but you just need to show that you're dragged there kicking and screaming, that you don't want to do it, that it's those pesky Remainers who forced you into it so that you can go to the election and hopefully win a majority off the back of that? Is that the real truth here?
No. Well, you're right in one sense, which is that Boris Johnson and this government will do absolutely everything in our power to deliver Brexit on the 31st of October. But we have no plan as to what might happen if Parliament, doesn't allow us to get Brexit done on the 31st of October, because we intend to get it done on that date. And that's the sole focus of this government at the moment. We don't want to see this go on beyond that date. I don't think the country does either. People really want us now to get Brexit done. And I think there is a genuine opportunity now to do that if the EU can respond to the compromises that we've made and offer some in return. And if you look at the proposal that we've put forward, this is a very fair proposal.
OK. I'm keen not to get into the details of the proposal because we've done so much on the kind of intricacies of the Brexit deals. Just very quickly, is the government visiting the Queen this weekend to try and ask for another prorogation in Parliament ahead of a potential Queen's speech?
I don't know the details of when the next Privy Council meeting is going to be held, but we've clearly set out our intention to prorogue Parliament in the usual way later this coming week to have a Queen's speech. And we're not taking any more days than is absolutely necessary to do that. The way that a Queen's speech happens, requires changes to the security arrangements in Parliament for the Queen and the Royal Household to make certain arrangements. And so we're simply proroguing Parliament for the minimum amount of time to enable that to happen.
Is it acceptable, though, to ask for a Queen's speech when you want an election? Because if you're going to have an election, there's going to be no time to implement the programme. You're effectively just using the monarch to read out a party political broadcast.
No, it's perfectly normal when you have a new Prime Minister, a new administration, for us to be able to set out our proposals and our legislative agenda in a Queen's speech. That's what always happens in these circumstances. You're right, we want a general election. We've been trying to get a general election now for some time, and absolutely without precedent, the Labour Party, as the official opposition, have been turning us down every occasion. But until such time as they come forward and agree to that election, to submit themselves to the democratic will of the people, Parliament needs to continue. This is the longest session of Parliament for hundreds of years, so it's perfectly reasonable now to have a Queen's speech and bring forward a new agenda.
I'm keen to talk about your brief, housing, something that is really important, perhaps a number one issue to many of our viewers and people in the country. Do you think house prices need to come down?
Well, there's definitely an issue of an affordability in this country. There are millions of young people who can't get on the housing ladder. I mean, I view this primarily as a supply problem. We haven't been building enough homes of all tenures.
But that means that prices would come down, right, if you increase the supply?
Well, I want to ensure that more homes are built for all people in all stages of their lives. And by doing that, we will make homes more affordable. So we're investing in affordable homes through an affordable homes programme. We're investing £9 billion in that. We're ensuring that councils have the powers to borrow should they want to build more council houses, and encouraging councils to do that. And in my time in office, only 10 weeks or so, I've also been bringing forward planning reform so we can unlock more land and ensure that private developers can finally build more homes and people can expand their homes as they need to, as their families get larger, as elderly relatives come to live with them. It's only by doing that that in the long term we'll sustainably fix this problem.
It does feel like it's one of the key dividing issues, in our society at the minute. I mean, Boris Johnson made a very passionate defence of capitalism in his conference speech. I just wonder that for so many young people, the dream of owning their home is effectively a fantasy. Why should they believe in capitalism if they haven't even got the hope of getting any capital themselves?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is why housing matters. It's not just about four walls and a roof. It's much more than that. It's about having a stake in society, saving for the future, investing in your family, putting down roots in a community. And those are all the reasons why, as Conservatives, we've always believed in home ownership. That dream has become unobtainable for many young people, of my generation and the next.
And is that the Conservatives' fault partly? I mean, you've been in government for quite a long time now.
Well, we've done a number of things to get more homes built. In fact, last year we built more homes in this country than any year bar one in my adult lifetime. This year it looks like it'll be significantly better than that. But there is a lot more that we need to do. What I'm doing is refocusing on home ownership, because although this has become unobtainable to some, I still believe that the vast majority of young people want to own a home. Certainly that's my experience of young people that I know. So we want more policies like shared ownership, for example, that can help people to get a deposit, get on the ladder more affordably. We want to bring forward planning reform so the system is simpler and cheaper. One planning reform that we've announced recently is the ability to build upwards in your home if your family grows, so you can affordably create more space in your property. And I'm also going to focus again on quality, because there have been concerns about the quality of some homes that have been built in this country. And I want to build confidence in new housing so that communities can welcome new housing development by ensuring that they look good, they're environmentally friendly, and people will really see these as a benefit to their local community.
I'm interested to know your thoughts on something the Chancellor said in a recent interview. He was asked about inheritance tax, and this is what Sajid Javid said. I understand the arguments against that tax. I do think that when people have paid taxes already, there is a real issue with then asking them on that income to pay taxes all over again. It's something that's on my mind. Do you think inheritance tax needs to be reformed?
Well, I think we're going to have to leave that for the Chancellor to make up his mind.
Come on, what's your
Well, it's
your
the Chancellor. I've been a Treasury Minister. I know that you don't comment on what may or may not happen in budgets. It is a tax which is particularly unpopular because people can see the fundamental unfairness of paying tax twice, and people having to, leave property which they've saved up their whole lives to build up to their children and grandchildren, then see them pay additional tax. So it's always been a tax which has been perceived to be unfair. And of course, many of those on higher incomes will find financial arrangements to ensure they don't pay. So I can see why the Chancellor is interested in this one.
Now, I'm being told we're out of time, but I'm going to squeeze in one more anyway. Now, you've got a pretty big, important job, but frankly, most of our viewers may not recognise you. Mm-hmm. You're a relatively new addition to the Cabinet table. So what's an interesting thing that we should all know about Robert Jenrick?
Oh, blimey. I think I'm the youngest cabinet minister since William Hague joined the cabinet, the first millennial, so I'm the first born in the 1980s. And if we do manage to get a general election later on this autumn, I think I'll be the first minister to have been elected 4 times in 5 years, assuming that my voters back home in Newark do vote for me again. So I like to think I'm the most accountable Member of Parliament at the moment.
Very good PR answer that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Robert Jenrick, thank you for being on the programme.